on Israel, our understanding is that talks are restarting between the U.S. and Israel about rescheduling that meeting that was supposed to be held this week on Rafah. So what is the U.S.'s understanding of why Prime Minister Netanyahu is having this apparent change of heart? Did the meetings with Defense Minister Gallant go particularly well this week and came to that conclusion?
So obviously I'm going to let the Prime Minister speak for himself on that first part of the question. What I can say on Israel more broadly, as you asked me about meetings that were held here, they were constructive discussions with Israel's defense minister over the last 2 days. Rafah was one of the many topics discussed with Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken, Lloyd Austin, and Bill Burns. The Prime Minister's office has agreed to reschedule the meeting dedicated to Rafah. So we're now working with them to find a convenient date that's obviously going to work for both sides. But his office has agreed to reschedule that meeting that would be dedicated to Rafah, which is a good thing. Okay.
Thanks, Karine. And actually, on that note, we had received a statement from the Prime Minister's office saying that Netanyahu did not approve the departure of the delegation to Washington, so disputing that they've agreed to the rescheduling. Could you just talk about what might be going on?
So look, I would say that as we are working to set a date, the Prime Minister's office agreed to reschedule this meeting. You saw that the Israel Defense Minister was here for 2 days, extended a day, and added another day to meet with Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken, Lloyd Austin, and Bill Burns. So that is the conversation that we're having. We are working to convene that meeting, an important meeting on Rafah, and when we have a date, certainly we'll share that with you. That is what we know from our side.
And what is the message that Defense Secretary Austin had to Gallant about the alternatives in Rafah?
I'm just not going to get into specifics of those conversations. Obviously, as I just stated, Rafah, the operations, the military operations more broadly, Rafah was indeed discussed, but I'm just not, as topics obviously that were discussed, I'm just not going to go into further details.
And have talks for that hostage deal and ceasefire, have they reached another stalemate, and what are the sticking points on it?
So I can confirm that talks continue, and the United States is actively engaged in those conversations. We remain hopeful that we can broker a deal to secure the release of hostages and establish a temporary ceasefire. This is something that we've been asking for some time. A ceasefire and this hostage deal obviously would allow us to bring home some hostages to their family, to their loved ones, and they include American hostages as well. And as well, bring into Gaza that all-important humanitarian aid that is needed in Gaza on the ground. I don't have anything beyond that, but we can confirm that we continue to have this incredibly important conversation on getting that hostage deal, which would lead to a ceasefire.
Just following up on what Selena was saying, Karine, does the administration believe it was able to convince Israeli officials to take a relook at a potential Rafah operation after the series of meetings that he had with the administration?
So look, I mean, Rafah obviously was part of the agenda, their military operations, and so I'm not going to go into detail. It is important that we have heard from the Prime Minister's office that we are going to reschedule and try to lock in this meeting with their obviously their folks on the Israeli government side and folks here, and so I think that's important. I'm not going to get into that. They, I would say they discussed how best to ensure Hamas' lasting defeat in Gaza and the need to protect civilians. So, of course, that was part of the conversation, but I'm not going to provide any more details beyond that.
Is the president thinking about reconsidering sending arms to Israel, given the unfolding situation and the unfolding humanitarian situation in Gaza?
There's nothing new there. That is not under consideration. As you know, we have done more to get humanitarian aid into Gaza with the airdrops. You know about the pier, and we're working with obviously with Israel to make sure that we get more of the trucks inside of Gaza. It is incredibly important. We know the dire situation in Gaza as it relates to humanitarian aid, but the most important thing here is to get that hostage deal, so we can get that humanitarian aid to get those hostages back home to their family, and it would we believe would lead to a ceasefire, obviously. And so that is what we're working towards. We got to get that hostage deal done, and we are actively continuing those talks.
Restricting weapons to Israel should also be a top consideration.
I'm
right?
not going to get into hypotheticals, into conditions from here. We've been very clear where we stand, and we'll continue to do so. We want to get that hostage deal done. The talks is active; they continue, and that is important to get the hostage deal, to get the ceasefire, to get that humanitarian aid into Gaza. It is incredibly, obviously, important as you all have reported the dire situation in Gaza, and so that is our focus. We're going to get that pier going. We're going to continue the airdrops, continue to get those trucks in, working with Israel on that. I just don't have anything else beyond that. Go ahead.
On the Rafah talks, you said that both sides are working to find a new date that works with schedules, but what level of urgency does the administration assign to holding those talks?
I mean, it's urgent. It's important. We've said that. The president has said that. The National Security Advisor was here at this podium saying those very words: the importance of making sure that there is a plan, and that we protect civilians. You've heard us say there's more than 1 million Palestinian civilians in Rafah. About 1.5. We have to make sure that they are protected. But at the same time, we want to make sure that that Israel also makes sure that Hamas is no longer operating, right? And so that is important as well. But these talks will get us into a place where there is a plan, that we hear their side, they hear our side. I think the defense minister being here from Israel was really important for 2 days, having those all important, all critical conversations about Rafah, about military operations. I'm just not going to get beyond that. When we have a date locked in, certainly we would share that with all of you.
There's been reporting that the talks could happen as soon as next week. Do you see that as feasible?
I'm just not going to get into a set date or time here, but we want it to happen. Obviously, it's urgent. We think it's urgent. It's important to lock this in, and so we're going to work really diligent to make sure that happens.